and she, through her leadership, the Community Design Agency has created positive changes within communities across 4 Indian cities. So she'll be sharing that work and the challenges that she's encountered through her work. About myself, I'm an urban planner, and I'm an adjunct associate professor at the Ashank Desai Center for Policy Studies in IIT Bombay. And I'm like basically an urban planner, and I've worked on regional plans and spatial plans at different scales. City development plans, and I've been trying some alternative approaches to planning, and so I'm hoping that we can really look at what are the gaps, and have an interesting, fruitful discussion. So I think, yeah, I think we should switch. Can we just, I think we'll move to the table. We just use this one. Yes. So the way, I hope, Sandhya, you can hear us? Can you hear me? Hello? 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 Yes. Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. So the way we are thinking of structuring this today's discussion, of course we're still going to try and catch the 10:15, so we keep it a little tight, though we've started a little late. So what we're going to do, what we are hoping to do is have 3 questions that we have the panelists respond to, and we're going to start. I'm going to start with as we sit here. I'm going to start with this. We're going to start with this question of how each of us understands the term urban commons, and how does each person's work kind of intersect with the urban commons, how do they encounter it in their work. So we'll start with some kind of understanding of where each person has, how they have thought about the commons, how they've encountered it, and through that we understand the work that they have done. And we all know that in our cities, we have, all cities are supposed to have plans in India, spatial plans which are mandatory, and we have certain expectations of what plans are supposed. We have expectations of what planning can do and should do. And when we look around us, the reality of our cities kind of raises this question about what exactly are these plans doing? Or there's this, a single intense monsoon tells us that planning is not working. We immediately say, where is this planning? And so on one end, clearly there are issues with our plans in our cities, and each of us in our work have found those, have encountered those issues, and we've been trying in our ways to overcome them. And so what I'll do is open the floor and maybe start with Sandhya, if you want to talk about your take on urban commons and the work that you guys have done.
Thank you, Nalini. When I was reflecting on the questions that were sent us, am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay.
A bit low.
Okay. Can I speak up or?
Oh, here? Okay.
Sorry, first of all, I couldn't be there. I was supposed to.
Yeah.
Is this good? Yes. as I was reflecting on the questions that you had sent us, Malini, I realized that sort of the definition of urban commons, right? It comes from a very Western perspective. And I won't get into the details of it because I think I'll be sort of, the audience is already aware of it, and so are the panelists. Um, and so that sort of understanding that comes with what urban commons is, and our own conditioning with our education, right, in terms of how we understand urban commons and how we design and respond to it. I found is so different from what actually happens when it comes to the ground realities. The communities that Community Design Agency works with, we work alongside marginalized communities. So in Mumbai, resettlement colonies, which are these, quote unquote public housing neighborhoods. In Ahmednagar, now Ahmadiyanagar, we're working with the Slum Redevelopment Project. We work with e-waste dismantlers in Delhi, and we also work with female sex workers in a town called Sherka. And sort of looking at how the communities end up engaging with what is considered sort of public space, and it's kind of, I think now we're taking the liberties of defining and redefining what urban commons are. Is that do you want me to stop for a second?
I'm just lowering the volume because I think it's too loud.
Okay, no problem.
Is this good?
Yeah. So, as a result of which, I think there's been a constant evolution of of how I personally, as a practitioner, understand what urban commons means, right? And sort of on the one hand, the rich social cultural layering, but also on the other, the deeply conflicting political and economical layering and how it impacts the communities who use it. We're all very familiar with slum redevelopment. And when that happens, the loss of what we consider sort of your micro-urban commons is very, very telling, right? The way the communities end up using the outdoor spaces, which is an extension of their homes as well. So you look at it in different perspectives, or even if it is a large ground that they have made a choice, that they made a choice to keep it open. And we see this in many of these smaller settlements, despite the lack of space, they do keep a fairly larger clearing available for festivals from different religions or for social events or cultural events. But the moment sort of redevelopment happens and you add the lens of sort of the economic value on the land, you lose that, you lose all of that, right? So, and then in the context of the rehabilitation neighborhood, where there's barely any open space at all, like they're not occupying anything, in terms of an open urban space, or even the idea of a public space is almost cut off. Unless they end up paying a little bit of money to take the bus or the train, or to go and find that, place to just sort of be, or occupy the space just for the sake of occupying it, with no exchange, right? With no sort of monetary exchange or any other sort of, motive, whether it is political or even religious. So for me personally, I think it's constantly evolving, and the moment you kind of take on even a small slice of corner, right? And just share a quick anecdote. We're working with a women's collective in this resettlement colony in Mumbai. And the whole goal was to figure out how do we just work alongside them to reclaim whatever little bit of space is open. And so we got started and we said, okay, as is the usual process, you want to test one out and see what happens, and then you move on to the next. So there are about 10 lanes and very, very narrow lanes, and we reclaimed one particular narrow lane based on sort of very active community participation, what they wanted the space to be and how they wanted to use it. And we were able to transform one lane. Now I'm realizing I probably should have had a slide, but that's okay. You can look it up, look our work up online. And a few weeks after, the women decided to clear out a corner which has been cluttered with garbage, right? They've never seen the ground of that space for 17, 18 years now. And what they do is they basically go in and then they clear out the garbage and immediately start planting as a way of reclaiming, and it is so fascinating, right? It's not cleared out and they haven't sort of used it for storage or they try to co-opt it because, once you clear up space and you are the one who cleared up the space, you kind of take it over or somebody else comes and take it over, whether it's Hatari or parking lot. So they ended up planting and then it became, it's only like all this 5 hectares of land. It was barely like 300 square feet of space. And everyone wanted a claim to it. So political parties, local associations put up these large boards. The boards were bigger than the parcel of the land that was, reclaimed in a way. So it's just, I think there are so many complexities and also along the scales of it and the communities who use it. And of course, all of the other aspects that I just discussed, political, cultural, financial, of course.
Thanks, Sandhya. I think, yes, very useful to start thinking about what commons mean and what, for these first many of the communities and the informal settlers in our cities. And I think that's great. Ashwini, you want to add on?
I think it's a great start with Sandhya because it gives a base to us as well to build on what we think of urban common as. So I'm presenting an organization called Nagar. It's an NGO and civic society. And we also collaborate. The specific project that I want to discuss today is on the urban commons and specifically on the public spaces in the city of Mumbai, where we are also collaborating with different stakeholders, including BMC and other research organizations like UDRI. And one of the things I want to connect back to Sandhya on what we believe as urban commons as that the core belief of the Nagar and UDRI as well is that it's a collective right. Urban commons are the collective rights of people, and that includes a spectrum of users, and how those users respond to these urban commons is something we have been very interested in. And the work that we do one of them is the research work. We go on ground, we understand what is happening to different open spaces in the city, we do the surveys, we get back that data, the standard research process. Another work which is very interesting is we file legal cases. So there are public litigations that we have been fighting in court, which are specifically challenging the development policy regulations in the development plan, which are talking about public open spaces. So how does the open space policy has been shaping in the city is the central focus of our work for, I think, since 1998. And that is something quite tedious and rigorous work in terms of just targeting one specific regulation in the development plan and thinking about it, how that interprets on ground is a big challenge to understand as well. So in terms of connecting it to Sandhya's discussion on informal settlements having extremely less number of open spaces, and the provision of it you see on development plans, but the on-ground reality is quite different than what has been envisioned for the development plan in the 20-year long run. What we've been trying to understand is, okay, how these communities are developing their own spaces within their extremely dense pockets, and how can the policy address that? Is there any mechanism that we can incorporate in the policy that can understand these informalities of urban commons? So that is something I want to, I think, get back to you as well, Mani, that, how do urban planning understands these integrities of informalities in the urban commons? Because those are extensive and those range from, say, people staying in the informal settlements is quite different. People staying in the heritage precincts and understanding the urban commons is quite different. So how do we address this varied spectrum of users and understand and cater to that civic right of urban commons? Has been the core focus of our work, and I think that sure, you can take it.
Maybe just one more. Can we avoid using the mic because the other sessions here now? Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think it's, both Sandhya's, can you hear me, Sandhya? Okay, so, I mean, just before, Rohan, you get into it, or maybe, I mean, it's both Sandhya and Ashwini, the points you've raised, how does planning look at it? Maybe what we do is we finish with Rohan's inputs as well, and then maybe I can kind of respond to what the typical planning practices and what the gaps are in planning.
Sure, we can do it that way. Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Rohan Sheikh. I come from a different end of the, you can say, industry. I come from the private sector. Basically, the way the industry is growing, the way the jobs are being created, and the whole economy is being driven. 5 billion economy, and the data center and the AI, as we know, is one of the major key drivers to that. And there are many challenges, this being a highly technical and a highly skilled kind of an industry. From a planning perspective, from a location perspective, say when we go and plan for a huge campus or a data center in any of the metro cities, as compared to globally, when we go to say other countries, challenges that we face in any city in India, even the big tier 1 cities like Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore, Chennai. So when it comes to say power, when it comes to fiber, when it comes to the open spaces, the BMC and all these local governing authorities, the kind of rules and regulations do they have. So just to give you an example, for a data center, the two main, you can say, the lifelines are power and fiber. A data center is a place where data is stored, and for any banking institute, AI or any company which is hosting its data over there, the key criteria is that it has to run 24/7 uninterrupted. The server has to be on. For that, from say 2 diverse substations, the power has to come on a HT line, high power source. You require 2 power sources to bring the power up to your campus. Now, when you plan a data center, suppose this is the building in which you are hosting the data, or a data center is there. The nearest 2 substations might be 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers away. Now, to bring that line of power, say a 220 kV line or a 110 kV line from those 2 substations up to your data center, the right of way and the infrastructure requirements and the collaborations that you need. If you go to any Western countries, there is a dedicated corridor through which all these services, whether underground or whether overground, whether you want to bring in power, whether you want to bring in fiber, wherein the nearest availability is there of a substation is there, or where all the telco providers are there, and you can bring the power and the fiber wherever you plan a data center. Here you have to wait for the site might be ready, the building will be up in around 18 to 24 months, but for more than 2 years to 3 years just to get the right of way. And because of so many construction activities going on, because of so many permissions and the right of way with the local permitting authorities and everything that you have to take, and because of so many other things going on, residential projects, metro works going on, the slum rehabilitations going on, and hawkers and other road works and everything going on, open spaces and problems that the BMC faces or the local governing body has. To get a power from a 2 kilometer or a 5 kilometer distance up to the data center, or from a fiber, just to lay that duct or a conduit from the nearest station up to the data center is one of the biggest challenges, you can say, and the main reason why an industry like a data center, which can be in a remote place also, there are no, you can say, dense number of people that work in a data center. It is practically a warehouse with just IT machines. But still, those kind of equipments, those kind of, you can say, warehouses, you have to locate them in the middle of the city. Like in Ahmedabad, you have to keep them in the right now in the middle, rather than keeping it say 50-100 kilometers away. because of this lack of infrastructure, or as we understand the urban commons, wherein it is not just about just the open grounds or parks and all these things. The basic infrastructure, you can say the pavements, wherein who is allowed, which company is allowed to say dig into those infrastructure, get in the power, get in the this fiber, the laying the conduits, laying the ducts. All these things also, the management is just haphazard in our country, wherein there are no common rules, there are no common regulations. Each and every, as you say, the politicization, and it is not just about the rich and the poor, that if you spend money you get it. So basically the problem about the utilization of resources which are common to all is just on a technical level. People don't know which industry requires it, or which set of people, and what is more critical, what is harming the environment more, what is harming the environment less. It is a lack of knowledge. We are still, you can say, outdated. We are still living in the 18th century. The world is moving at a very, you can say, a faster pace. The countries who, you can say, adjust to it or keep pace with it, that if, laying a fiber or getting a substation line is, if you consider it, or if you take 2 years in just, getting that infrastructure done, you are not protecting the environment. You are just, what you are practically doing is, you are not giving jobs to, the people around there, and you are just delaying the growth of the economy. That is what you are doing.
Thanks, Rohan. I think with these three panelists, what we've seen is that whole spectrum of what the commons, I mean, Rohan comes at it at the other end of the spectrum of needs from the industry, how do we, and the same resources. I mean, at one end, we talked about the informal settlers or settlements that do not have access to basic services, or do not have access to open space, and we know housing, water, all of the essential services. And here you have an industry like data centers, an industry that is looking for a large amount of power, a large amount of water. Well, not in our country is what Rohan tells me, but basically uninterrupted power and access to infrastructure, which again is then allowing the entire population to access data, which is where we are all headed, with our and the need for more and more connectivity, which we are all trying to get at an equal level and have that equity. But you can see the real challenges, and the scales are quite different. And actually, I mean, to respond in terms of, when you ask this question, what does planning do and how does planning respond to this challenge, and this really, two ends of a spectrum almost. One, a large industry, and the other, which is, daily sustenance, power for daily sustenance or water for daily sustenance. And at the other end is an industry which needs a lot, and at the same time the promise of jobs, and that kind of, scales of need. So I would say that, if we look at how planning is practiced in this country, in a sense it is unable to address either. Nowhere, I mean, that entire spectrum of urban commons, whether it is space, like in terms of open spaces for like people who are densely packed in the Mumbai case, and all of us are from Mumbai. We have 8% of the land accommodating 40% of the population in informal settlements, and naturally, no wonder, the amount of need for the amount of, I mean, they're so concentrated that you don't have that open space, and then how do you respond? And does planning even think about, how does planning address informality? At the core is the core question. And I would say that the way planning is set up, it is to, the entire discipline is set up to look at property rights. It's set up, the basis of planning is property rights and protecting property rights. So the moment you see informality, it is tied to illegality in a sense. And so it becomes very hard as a discipline to, you can only toe the government line because you're finally a government tool. And so if the government doesn't have a policy which is, or a law which puts aside that land for housing, for, you know, and in like till the Street Vendors Act comes in, you do not have, you think that they are illegal, they are encroachers. And so you are not going to provide for them through planning. So, you know, the discipline itself has certain limitations in terms of how it looks at this situation. Now, having said that, you know, it also doesn't map informality. Like the base for plans is mapping and the existing land use. So historically, we've had this tradition of not even mapping informal settlements, because just by mapping you recognize. So if you're not going to map that informality, then how do you provide for it? So these are, like, there are fundamental questions, I would say, at a disciplinary level in how you practice planning. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why it's unable to address these needs. Now, having said that, I mean, things are moving slowly, but there, you know, there are like if I take the last development plan, you know, we have mapped these informal settlements for the first time, but we still don't have the land for, just like if I take the open space need that you guys, the two of you talked about, you know, we begin to say that what is the nearest space, or how can we allocate land close enough to help or provide spaces for the informal settlements. So that's one thing that's happening. But to also address this question that Rohan raised, you know, whether power or future needs, which is what planning is supposed to do, and put in that thing, you know, do we even recognize urban commons as this kind of you know, you have a you decide to draw a certain amount of power or bring certain amount of water into the city, but I think planners are not yet, and I don't think it's even possible. Nobody would have foreseen this kind of growth in communications or data centers. So it's not been factored clearly. And so, and when listening to you, you know, I have the other question. On one hand, you have 50% of the population who just need the same water, or need the same power, more maybe, just for sustenance. And then you have this industry which needs a certain level or a certain, so how does one balance these needs even? You know, that I think in our context, this becomes a critical, like, who decides how much should come into a city? And it also raises the other question, you talked about sustainability, but you know, how does planning look at sustainability, and is that even centered in the discipline of planning? I mean, my experience is environment doesn't even feature. You know, planning, the only provision it does for environment is what is legally put out as protected by the law. So forests are protected, the coast is protected to some extent through CRZ. So whatever is legally protected gets incorporated into the plan, and that's it. So there are fundamental issues with the way planning responds, and I think that's also the reason why we are unable to secure many of these things. I mean, I've already moved, I think, a little bit into the, thanks to Rohan, to the challenges. And I was wondering if we can then, you know, do a round of thinking. We have about half an hour. So if we can talk both about challenges and what you think, you know, how can planning respond? How does it respond? Maybe through examples. Sandhya, we can follow the same sequence, or if anybody else wants to jump in. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think, I mean, Malini, you pretty much covered the challenges around it, right? And you did. I mean, it was like a master class just listening to it, like just put it out there really succinctly. But this is exactly what happens. The issues around resources, right? The issues around access to resources is something that there is a certain strata of society, and even to an extent, even middle class, right? Once you move into the suburbs, at the cost of, you know, not losing some power supply in Mumbai, the suburbs pay for it. the ones who have money also. I mean, we're just not talking only about the people below, the communities living below poverty line or living in poverty, right? So um, this kind of sort of imbalance in resource sharing has been, I think, a problem for the longest time. And for me, it's very fascinating to watch where now that there is a certain sector industry which is loaded with money, but they're not able to get the resources as quickly as they can. The fact that they have to a large extent, the power as well, right? Political power, because there's money involved in it. Let's just be open about that. And and then the way you talked about how without the Street Vendors Act, planning cannot even account for it, even though they are part of our lives every day when you see it, right? And the time that it takes. So I almost find it interesting. I mean, Rohan, not to sort of make light of the conundrum that you're in, because you see the great potential, like for us to move ahead, move forward, and have better access, and the kind of access technology provides to everybody across strata of society cannot be denied, right? We have recently heard of this thing where people order from Amazon from their homes and informal settlements, and then it becomes a PIN code, and they're saving the receipts, the Amazon bills, as proof that they've lived here for this duration of time, right? And they're laminating and keeping it at home as a way to claim, or not ownership but use, rights, right? So it's not that but it's, I think it only lays bare the fact that the amount of time or bureaucracy to act on anything, and in a way there is an opportunity for the people with a lot of resources to potentially impact the way the system works. As opposed to what is happening right now is just keep finding loopholes. I mean, and let's face it, that's how it works, right? Because if you can't get something to move in 2 years, what's the quickest way to move it? And we all know the answer, I'm not going to say it in a public platform. But I guess at some point, you kind of reach that sort of, what is it called? Point of diminishing returns, right? Even that is not enough anymore. So for me, it's fascinating to see that, because there are certain stratas of society who have been dealing with this for the longest time, and now people with a lot of resources are saying, hey, we're here with like $1 billion, but you can't do anything about it, but that's the way our system works. So that's what came to my mind as Rohan was talking about challenges he's facing, and Madhu, the way you articulated the limitations of planning. Now, what's the answer for equal resource sharing? Or rather equitable, not even equal, equitable resource sharing, and what that means? I think that's going to require maybe days and days of sitting down and talking to different stakeholders. I'm not sure that we can do this in the next 15 minutes. But yeah, that's sort of my contribution.
I want to come on this point of where you mentioned that forests and coasts are protected for development, because they are defined in a certain way by law, and hence they get protected. But the way they have been defined over the years, since our post-development plan till today, has been changing quite significantly. Like if we today see SGNP's new draft plan and the eco-sensitive zones that have been marked into that draft plan are allowing certain kind of developments and encroaching into that forest, which is reflecting, and you can find that timeline of 67 to 2034 development plan and how the urban commons definitions are being modified. So I think that is one of the very big challenge, even for public spaces. Like Sandhya said that, what do you even call an open space? For someone who is staying in an informal settlement, it might be just a 300 square meter open space considered as recreation space, or on the other hand, you can take Oval Maidan, or like the heart of the city, the open space that's been there for ages. So in terms of how development plan is redefining these spaces over the years is also a big challenge. You cannot pinpoint and say what is an open space through your development plan. It's still in that ambiguity. And because of that, there are loopholes that are created to exploit those urban commons. So I think that is a very big challenge that planners are facing today to
understand how urban commons are, how do we place them? How do we imagine them?
I think Rohan, I think we should also open it up to audience. So I'm just thinking, I have some inputs on possibilities through some recent work that I did, which I can share. But please go ahead and.
So just a couple of points. I think these loopholes and all these things that we are discussing, I think the way we have evolved is about we are relatively, if you go by the age, we are relatively a young country. And if you see the relevance of, with the exposure of the whole, people like us also, 20 years back, if you would have told me that, this particular home where I stay, if I'm giving you for say 1 lakh rupees, but it has no garden, it has no open space, versus there is a well green space or an open space, it costs say 2 lakh rupees or like 10-20% more, I would have not bought that. If I'm getting the same carpet area or the same square footage of place where I live in, but if it is costing me 20-25% less, I would have got that, because the relevance of open space, even right now, let us talk about the people who who can afford it or who can care for it. With the growing awareness of how important it is, of whether it is for festivals, whether it is just for pure breathable air, or just for a walk or a stroll down the park, people are realizing, institutions are realizing, enterprises are realizing, companies are realizing sustainability, as we are mentioning, open spaces, clean air, clean water, clean all these things. So now, all these loopholes that we were discussing, see, ultimately, for a governing body, a PMC or a municipal body, there were loopholes, corruption, this, that we were discussing. But now, money is also coming in where, the forest exploitation, coastal exploitation, if any enterprise, a big industry has to come in any, big state, if an ENY or a KPMG does the audit and it sees that the coasts are not protected, or the energy is not clean, the air is not clean, a multi-billion-dollar project will say go to Maharashtra rather than coming to Gujarat. Just giving an example, because these things now on a global level, on an enterprise level, on a personal level, like me and you buying a house, these things are beginning to matter now. So these loopholes will, in the next plan, possibly, hopefully, will start getting addressed. On the sustainability part, my point was that if these are more of questions when you already are meeting your basic requirements, or your business is at that point where you are overdoing it. Right now, from an Indian point of view, whether we are talking just from a data center perspective, manufacturing perspective, IT perspective, if you compare from the global level, we are not even, you can say, 100th or 1000th of the capacity or the business requirement that the world operates on. If you compare the size of the countries globally versus the size of the population, the size of even the landscape that we have in terms of square kilometers, and the actual manufacturing that we do, the actual IT that we have, or the data that we store, we are still way behind, considering the power that we generate, considering the resources that we have. So right now, while it is good that we have that vision for sustainability in terms of whether we produce anything, whether we generate anything, but still the basic infrastructure, let us first reach a stage that we are self-sufficient, we generate enough, you can say, capacity for the produce that we require, for the over-industrialization process, as we, the term that we there. Then those challenges can be met at a later date, while the blueprint can be laid upfront. Without even, say, generating or manufacturing or reaching that industry levels which the world has reached 50 years back, to not do it in the apprehension that we might be harming the environment is a wrong notion as of then, because people are generating, you can say, so much more industrialized and so much more, and way behind 50 years back. If you go to Europe and you see the kind of roadways that they have, or the infrastructure that they have on the top of the mountains, you see that their mountains are as good or as green with the railways and the roadways that they built around 50 years back.
And that kind of infrastructure with our mountains, with the garbage that we throw on the mountains, without doing any industrialization on the top of the mountains, we have spoiled our greeneries and our forests and our mountains more. So without getting, you can say, afraid of industrialization, the minimum that is required, that has to be done.
Okay, Rohan's like, you know, I have some differences with you on that, but because just in terms of, I don't think it is, you know, you're talking about you need a certain amount of progress before you can start addressing basic needs of, so, you know,
The blueprint can be there, yeah, blueprint can be there, but work should at least, my point is that the basic work should happen without causing any, major hindrances in terms of the policy decision.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I just think that if we usually come to this point of wringing our hands and saying, what can we do then? Because planning doesn't, it has all of these blind spots, and how do we think about it? And really, I'm looking at the clock here. I'm just thinking that it might be useful to share a small experiment. Not an experiment, a small project, planning project that I was recently involved with in a small town in Kerala, where through a participatory process we actually created an alternative plan to what the government had produced as a plan. And what is interesting is it was a participatory process. It actually recognized and mapped the actual practices on the ground, which we don't find. So what are the commons? These commons that we talk about, how are people using land? If we because in planning it's all about use. What are the activities and the uses around land? And those are usually not even acknowledged. And I don't, images will be great, so let me just see if I can quickly share something. Yeah, I think it's better, right?
Share the screen and then
Sure. Yes. Just a second.
yes.
It's not right here. Let's share it. Yeah. So, that's okay. So I just want to share something. This is a small town in Kerala, and this is the kind of setting, quite rural, quite agrarian, and they had a plan which where the typical urban planning actually every road was to be widened. That was one of the big plan proposals, and it would have destroyed this. There would be no town left because in Kerala all the development is along the roads. This is the kind of old trees. You can see these are the social spaces. Usual plans don't even map these resources, these social spaces, and these are the kinds of. It was just 14 square kilometers, 32,000 people, but you had a system of ponds or rainwater harvesting system, 171 water bodies. So I just this is a typical silences and maps. In plans, the public spaces are not mapped, the cultural spaces are not mapped, the commons are absolutely absent. Even beaver grounds, so productive spaces were not mapped and they were converted into parks. So just to say that actually I feel that the plan is a great instrument to rectify this. So these were the kinds of things that got recorded. The cultural spaces were mapped. We could actually do something by acknowledging first that these spaces exist, and then by doing that, I'm not going to get into this, but by doing that, what we could do is we recognize all of these systems and we map the way water. There was a certain resilience in the town because of the way in which these. The town operated. The paddy fields were where the 2018 floods did not affect the town because of the resilience of this entire system, this drainage ecology that exists in the paddy fields where the mentioned things. But I just wanted to say, we could even map the street vendors so that then we could provide for it. If you didn't have that data, so the first thing I would say is just mapping all of that, recognizing it as a need, and then in the master plan you actually, in the zoning, which normally is just a zone, but you put in the commons as a layer that you then protect. Because if you did not even have that as a layer that you map, then you're not able to respond to it. So you bring in the commons as a layer because you map it. So small point. I just wanted to say that these are the river edge, and we did a lot of things. But I just wanted to say that because it was a participatory process too, things that you normally would not find in a plan, like the agriculture, just 2 storage godowns or a rice processing zone, a rice processing space comes in because you talk to people. From the planner's imagination, it was just a market that was provided, like a terminal market that nobody wanted. So, I just wanted to say that, I just stopped sharing, but I wanted to show that, what do I do here? End? No. So yeah, I just wanted to share that there is, what one has seen now is, even in a city like Mumbai, and I wanted to just end with that, there is a wonderful paper by Professor Parthasarathy from IIT, where he has talked about hunters, gatherers and foragers in Mumbai. That there are practices which are absent, which are there but not recorded, not acknowledged. And because you don't acknowledge it, then you cannot safeguard it, you cannot provide for it. So even with the informal settlements, it's that blindness to the needs completely. You just see them as a problem with this kind of housing need, without thinking that actually this is your, this is a resource, these are people that you should take care of, and how do you then allocate the land for it? It is a modification in how you think about people as resource. And I think factoring that into planning, then what are their needs comes automatically. What is the industry need comes automatically. I just want to stop there, and I think we open the floor to questions and yeah. Yes.
Hi everyone. It was good to hear about urban commons, and it's very rarely spoken about. And I just wanted to share that your experience in Kerala. I think it is very rare to see that, because Kerala has a history of people's planning from 1996. They've already gone through people's plan. They have prepared the people's plan from the LDF government when A.K. Nayanar was the Prime Minister, Chief Minister. So I think this kind of experiment, I would like to know the name of the town. I couldn't see the name of the town because I am from Kerala and I've been part of this people's plan for a long time. So I know that it's not difficult to do such a planning in Kerala. And it is part of their culture. It's part of their, it's part of their genes to do participatory planning, accountability, transparency. Women participate in the processes. It's very much there. But to bring this participatory planning method to other cities, to Ahmedabad, to bigger, larger cities, which really require it, because it is getting, the urbanization is so fast, and we are losing our commons. We can see everywhere the commons getting lost. So how do we do that? I think that is the challenge. See, we can always talk about small towns, 1 or 2 examples, but how to upscale it to make it a practice in our urban planning. It is there in the act to get people's voices. You have to put up the plan for so many days, but how much of that is practiced? So these are things which I think I would like to know. And the second thing I wanted to say is Goa, for example. They have this community system where commons are supposed to be community managed, but it creates a lot of conflicts. Like when you want to put up electricity line, or if you want to make a road a little broader, they manage. We have the panchayat system, we have the municipality system, but it doesn't come in any of those. So there's a lot of conflict with the people, and then you lose out on infrastructure, which is very valuable. So how do we kind of match these two systems, and how do we work through that? so that we get the benefit of
Even Uber isn't allowed.
Huh?
They're not allowed Uber in Goa.
No, I know that. I live in Goa now. I live in Goa, but the roads are so narrow, they are so bad. There is huge Kazan land lying there, but it's ecosystem, it's fragile, so they won't allow, but they won't even allow widening the road a little bit, though there are certain commons. It's not that you're going to use all of it, but you need to have minimum basic facilities like roads and internet connection, which I see this point very much. So we can't shy away from that. Thank you.
In whole discussion, what is the urban commons? I think it is not clear. And how many types of urban clear? It should be present. And second is, now the India is going towards urban cities. Urbanization. But we don't think the village. Today, 95,000 villages is in the limb of urbanization. This is the another challenge for rural India. अभी जो स्लम बढ़ते जा रहा है उसका बारे में कोई डिस्कशन में अच्छा खास डिस्कशन नहीं हुआ। और तीसरा बात ये है, अभी भी भारत में जितना सिटी है, गांव से कोई आदमी आ रहा है सिटी के ओर, उनका छोटा मोटा काम करने के लिए, पेशाब करने के लिए उनके लिए जगह नहीं है। ये बड़ा गंभीर बात है ना? तो उसी हिसाब से अर्बन का ऊपर हम डिस्कशन करने से पहले अभी क्या स्टेटस है इंडिया का, क्योंकि 50 साल के अंदर ये देश पूरा सिटी की ओर चला जाएगा, अर्बन की ओर चला जाएगा, तो उसके ऊपर भी बहुत चर्चा होना जरूरी है।
One more question.
So I am Keyur and I am a journalist working for an organization called The Secretariat, which is media partner for this event. One of the topics Rohan also mentioned, we can have more greenfield cities. I mean, if you look at GIFT City, it has every infrastructure underground, and there are lanes where you can move the trucks and repair all the ducts, and whether it is drainage line or water line. So whether this can be applied in brownfield projects, I don't know. But if we can have more greenfield projects and then shift the people from existing localities to greenfield areas, and that could be one of the possibilities. How long it can take and how much it can cost is a different thing. Second thing, we look people as obstructionists and not as problem solvers. So many problems, I mean, people would themselves suggest the solution. So what happened in case of Kerala?
Sorry, we just lost power and I think we lost somewhere. Yeah.
So we look people as obstructionists, protesters actually. But if you look at Kerala models and other, there are various cases where people come out with solutions. This is a solution. Yesterday there was a session on ladies from Bihar who use solar power irrigated systems to earn money. So they became a problem solver rather than a problem. So we have to also change the way we look at our citizens. So this requires a total reimagination of the decision-making structure. It is extremely centralized as of now, and it is getting increasingly centralized. The idea is we should have more decentralized planning and also capacity building, because we don't know how much the officials or the decision makers, the bureaucrats and the politicians are capable of. So decentralization, capacity building at decentralized level, and looking people as problem solvers, as participants rather than as an obstruction. I mean, these are some of the issues that I have been attending many sessions, and These are something common that are coming out of it. That's all.
Sorry, there's some technical glitch here. But, so these are disparate, I mean, 3 questions, and I don't know, I can just respond as the planner in the room. I would say that, I'm wondering which end to start from, but the first question was, urban commons is not well defined in this session. And I think that the commons, regardless of location, remain the same as something that is generally used, as spaces that are commonly used or commonly, so it would include streets, it would include environmental resources that are for the general good, it would include things like the digital commons. So that whole spectrum in a sense, and also resources which are community managed, even often without us explicitly saying so. So, the fact that you have certain realms which are open to, like during a festival, people will, this is allowed. Like there is a sense of what the community thinks of as commons. Like this is something. Or if you take the fisher folk, there is a sense that because of our earlier history of the land being common, that this is considered our stretch, and in fact, when you have an industry coming on the coast, that conflict comes in because their conception of property itself is different. And I think that we have moved quite a lot from this conception of land as a common resource to this private consumption and encroachment of deciding, this is somebody's land. And I think that also comes from the colonial period of the land being there is this shift that has happened. And I think in what you said and what the lady there said, that we talked about something as greenfield. And I think this notion of greenfield itself is problematic because there is no greenfield. It is not greenfield, there are uses there that we are not recognizing. We just think that if it's open, as long as it's agricultural.
I was talking of greenfield projects.
Yes, but the greenfield comes from this notion of this land not being belonging, that it's something that if it is agricultural, if it is not productive in a certain industrial or a consumption, capitalist mode, we think it has not been improved, and therefore we can think of it as lower and that can be improved, that it's greenfield. Downfield is something you built something on, and I think this itself is highly problematic because, and so when you talk about can we have a lot of greenfield sites, I think there are fundamental ways in which people have occupied land for centuries, which takes in the environmental and ecological understanding of where is the water, where is a good place to settle. And when we are talking about greenfield, we are actually saying going away from places which have a history of the good place to be for settling. We move away, and in fact a lot of the DMIC corridor, they are talking about 100 new cities in an area which is water scarce. The reason why there are no cities there is they're not great places to settle. And that knowledge, that understanding of what is really rich agriculture, what is very rich, poor to settle, is where we are now rethinking and just going and saying, oh, this is empty land, let's build a city. And I think there are a lot of fundamental issues with how we think about land. And I think the biggest problem I see is planners' conception of expert knowledge. Because I don't think they understand, and I don't think there's an environmental basis to what we have inherited as a colonial system. We don't understand our cities, we've not studied them enough, it's not there in the curriculum. And then we're going ahead and promoting a way of being. So, this Kerala example, what you were asking, even in Kerala, town planning is the same, and it is not progress at all. What you're talking about participation isn't participatory budgeting in a sense. There is participation, but what they have been able to do is there is no spatial, the participation has not entered the spatial realm at all. The spatial planning is the same across the country.
No, the rural planning has improved in Kerala for sure.
I'm saying the spatial.
Yeah, even the spatial planning, there are people who do participate in the planning process and in a different way. I have seen planning in Ahmedabad, I've seen planning in Kerala, so I know the difference.
Yeah,
And then
so-
they're just much more participatory than other places.
There's that, okay, but I mean, I will accept that you're from there and you know the place. There has been one model, the Kollam district model,
I am
where
from
there was an whole participatory
Yes,
process.
I am from Kollam. I
Yeah,
know
that was the only, I was going to say, somebody said, can we institutionalize this? That's a great model.
Yeah.
It has a
Yeah.
wonderful system that they demonstrated in early 2000s, which, we have not taken ahead, unfortunately. So there have been great models there, but, I think you also asked this question, how can it be replicated in other cities? We've had trials. So Delhi had a local area plan. So I mean, especially, and also from this Kerala example in Chittoor, Tattamangalam in Palakkad, what I have come to realize is that probably the best thing is your electoral booth. That is a good scale. You start at that. So you have the councillor completely engaged. He has to promise something. You make spatial planning at that level. So at the neighborhood level, you collect people, and then the money comes to the plan. So typically we have plans, we don't have funds. And where the funds are at the village level, you don't have plans. So if you can marry the two, and that's what Kollam showed, that you can actually marry the two at the district scale and then down to the local body. But this participatory process tells you that it is possible to design at the local scale. Absolutely start with the electoral board, get your municipal councillors, get your elected representatives to come on board.
But
And-
what capacity development we will require? I mean, we have to
Hello.
develop capacity, so we need entire structure for capacity building.
Yes, which is what the Kollam model tells you. It had a full system, it has toolkits, and if you need a full different process, so because people do know their land much better. Planners also have to get reoriented. It's a full rejig.
So just a couple of this thing. One is that now with all the planning at local level, as we were panchayat level or say as town level, but with the infrastructure or you can say the scale at which now we are talking. Suppose, say for example the bullet train, you have to connect from Ahmedabad to Mumbai. There will be 500 villages, there will be like 100 towns, there will be 10 major metro cities. Now for the priorities and the decision making of where the column is going to come and from where the route is being taken, if each and every panchayat starts poking its nose in the middle, 50 years from tomorrow, from today if we count, the infrastructure of this scale is never going to come. So with the scale at which we are talking and the scale at which I was talking where the world is and where India still is, if we have to, and considering the saturation that is there and the kind of revamp that we need in terms of our roads, in terms of our even the open spaces, in terms of our regulations, in terms of where we have to be, how long can we have each and every, like if we are building a bridge, a local fisherman colony comes and says, and it goes on the stay in the High Court for 5 years, and the project which was supposed to get completed in 2015 gets completed in 2025. As ma'am was mentioning, you just want to widen the road a little bit in a wonderful city like Goa, still the local bodies and the local, because they might, it's not just about corruption. As I was saying, it is about lack of knowledge. They might not know an electric pole coming in, how important it is, not just for them, but for 2 kilometers down the line where another village is or another taluka. Some decisions have to be taken by a group of people or an authority which is looking at the whole 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. Everything cannot be left to the, the village panchayat and the women who are looking at their own fisherman market and everything. Some planning has to be done at a macro scale.
Great. One last question, I think we'll see one more, but yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to address the last thing you said, but also before that, something important emerged, which is, I think there are two different points, but they're kind of connected. One is that it's not either or. It's not either environment or development. Yeah? It doesn't start like that.
It's not about environment,
Let me finish.
it's about the scale.
Let me finish. So that's the last point I'll come to. So I think it's very unproductive at every scale to start seeing, defining the problem in advance as if there is a unresolvable conflict between environment and development in general, right? And the moment you avoid that, you start, like we do in everyday life, making simple micro-level decisions. We are looking at the trade-offs, and we are constantly trying to improve our understanding through expert knowledge and all that of what are the trade-offs. What is the environment? If I make a decision at a personal level, which I didn't know enough about, then I will learn from it. What has happened, we have seen in the US, which is of course the land of all the right promises, is that 35, 40 years ago, they had started to realize that we have been so stupid in our planning, right? Now the choice we have is to say, no, they were stupid, we will continue with the same stupidity, refuse to look at the environment, refuse to look at human life, and let's follow exactly that same path. Now that's what the West has kind of taught us and given us a kind of colonial mindset. We say that we have to follow their trajectory, and only when we destroy our environment do we have enough money to then to have the luxury of food. So I think we do not need to fall into that trap. We have to start by saying, today we know various things which they didn't know 50 years ago. From this point, we know there's climate change. Trump denies climate change, right? So we have a choice to make. So I think if we move like that, we'll be in a better place. Secondly, about this decision of where the decision should be, again, it's a trade-off. Yeah. You are actually, to take your own example, it's well established that the bullet train is a stupid idea in every possible way. And it's because extreme centralization allows people to take extremely unwise decisions and then ram them through an entire landscape of hundreds of kilometers. So it shows you both sides. That sometimes, yes, some decisions need to be taken, but even that can be more participative, more deliberative, and your decisions are going to be better.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're at 10:30, so we can take the discussion outside the room. Thank you so much, and thanks to all the partners. I'm sorry we lost Sandhya. Thank you.
Because that was my first experience 2000 when we actually made a shadow plan for Patna, for Sweden.